What's going on, everybody? It's Joel here, and today we're going to be doing the review of the Under Armour Tribase Rain 6. All right, so first off, I want to apologize for completely lagging on doing this review. I got these shoes all the way back in the end of December. That's when they first popped up on UA.com. And throughout the course of January, stuff just kept on popping up and just kept on delaying my review. And now we're almost 2 months later at the end of February, and we're just getting around to it. I guess better late than never. But on the positive side, at least I've really used these shoes. I've gotten in a ton of workouts with them, and I mainly have positive things to say about the Tribase Rain 6. I've really liked training in these shoes. First, let's talk about the construction of the Tribase Rain 6. So this is a brand new model. Not a lot of similarities in the previous shoes. I guess if you want to get technical, like Under Armour's Tribase Rain series shoes all kind of have the same Tribase Rain kind of look, but the actual way that the shoes are designed is completely different. One thing that carries over from the previous versions is the warp fabric. You're going to notice that on the medial side of the shoe, and it is actually split on the lateral side to another mesh material. It's not like a ballistic mesh. It's almost like a TPU kind of mesh. And then I think it's a different look. Some people are going to love it. Some people are going to hate it. I don't mind it at all. It kind of reminds me of the Metcon React Turbos and the way that those kind of split off to the side. And yeah, if you like texture, then you're gonna like it. If you don't like a lot of things going on in your upper, then you might not like it so much. Around the back part of the shoe, there is the same actually kind of nylon woven material that was on the Tribase Rain 5s, not the 4s, just the 5s. And that is for more structure in that area. And then you have an Achilles tab that is actually, it's like sewn in, but it does an actual pretty good job of keeping your heel secured. There's no heel slip in the shoes, which there might have been a problem in some of the previous versions. It's not an issue with the shoe. And then around the front, you have some just normal laces. I don't really think I ever had an issue with these laces. They're like kind of a little softer piped lace. And then the tongue is a little bit on the thinner side. I think people hated the tongue on the 5 for being a little bit thicker. This is a good middle ground of having some kind of weight to it without being too thick like the 5s were. I actually had no problem with the 5s, but I don't have any issues with this one. I personally don't like a really thin tongue. That's just, I guess, my own preference. And then these are gusseted in the insides. So now let's take a look at the biggest change coming from the previous Tribase Rain models, and that is the inclusion of a drop in midsole. So there was the Under Armour Charged something or other that I reviewed years ago before there was the Tribase Rain, and they had a drop in midsole. This midsole is kind of actually similar to the midsole that was on those. It's got a spring to it. It's very responsive. It's kind of like poppy. And then this one actually has, unlike the previous one, this one has a dual density heel. So the heel material is going to be a little bit more dense for your power transfer. And then the forefoot it's responsive. It's a little bit on the softer side, but it doesn't feel like mushy. It's definitely not as stiff as something like the Metcon 1 through 4s, which was more on the responsive side. And it kind of leans more onto the Metcon 5 and 6, and maybe even Metcon React. Like every model previously of the Tribase Rains, the 6s also do have a 2mm drop, giving it that more minimalistic feel. So Now let's take a look at the outsole of these shoes, which is probably the biggest departure from any of the previous models in the past. So the previous models all kind of had the same basic design to the outsole. This now has a multi-directional tread pattern all throughout the toe. It's like this like wavy tread pattern, and it's designed so that you have like targeted traction areas. Like there's bigger lugs on the outsides of your foot, and it's more narrow in the middle of your foot. And then you've got this break around the metatarsals, so you get that forefoot flexibility. And then in the mid part of the shoe, you still have the Tribase design, except now there's like a midfoot shank. It's like a TPU piece right there. It's exposed, and it's actually holding up a lot better than I thought it was gonna hold up. It still says Tribase right there. And then you have the triangle design, which is supposed to give you 3 greater points of contact with the ground, so you get better foot control when you're using, the Tribase range shoes. And then at the heel part, there's a tougher rubber that goes from the heel all the way to the back part of the shoe. And I thought that would be an issue when you're doing handstand push-ups because of just how like rough and textured this rubber in the back feels, but never had any issues. I actually was able to nail that handstand push-ups in these shoes absolutely no problem. But going back to the middle part of the shoe, that's also where the sidewalls are raised on the side, and that traction pattern continues up the side of the shoe. The overall traction on these shoes is excellent. This is one of the best in terms of grip shoes that I've ever used. The compound is very grippy, sticky. It like works on just about all of the platforms that I've put it on, dusty wood flooring, and the rubber flooring inside of the gym. But the one thing that I found that it wasn't that great for was surprisingly rope climbs. I thought that these were gonna be an excellent rope climbing shoe, and they're not bad, but they aren't that great either. It requires a little bit more work to get your feet set with these shoes. Usually I can jump, get my feet around, get the rope hooked pretty quickly. These ones, you do have to kind of run the rope more around your foot than you would typically with some of the better rope climbing shoes that just kind of hook on immediately. And I think that's because the edges, at least in the inside, are a little bit rounded compared to some of the more angular shoes. Surprisingly, these didn't do as good as I thought, but they are still definitely usable. Which leads me to another thing, and this is one of the things that I had noticed initially with the Tribase Reigns, is the actual construction seems so-so. And that's because there's like, you could see the glue in the seams where it connects to the outsole. And I don't know, there's like little gaps here and there. And it just doesn't seem all that well, I guess, put together. Like there's no failure points. It might just be me, and it might just be because I could see the glue like all over the place with the shoe, but it just doesn't have that like look of assurance when it comes to like quality. But so far, I mean, the shoe feels well made enough. So we'll see if it withstands the test of time. Another thing that I wasn't so keen on was the weight of these shoes. Right when I pulled them out of the box, I noticed that they were a little bit on the heavier side, which was surprising to me. The Tribase Reigns 5s were getting heavier, and now these are actually what I consider a heavy shoe. So I got a men's size 10.5 in at 14.2 ounces. I'll leave the gram somewhere up there. But to me, that's a fairly heavy shoe. When you're over 14 ounces, that's actually heavy training shoe territory. It hides the weight pretty well because they're very flexible, and there's like kind of an airy feel when you have your feet inside of them. But you will notice the weight when you are more tired, when you're running, and when you're like doing like longer workouts that have a lot of jumping movements. All right, so when going to size your Tribase Range 6s, I'm gonna recommend that unless you have a really wide foot, if you have like a narrow foot, then you're probably gonna wanna go with a half size down with the Tribase Range 6s compared to the 5s and probably the 4s. Definitely if you're coming from a Nike Metcon, you're probably gonna wanna go half a size down if you had a narrow foot. And I'm saying that because I know a lot of people in the past gravitate towards the Under Armour series shoes because they're not super wide. But if you did have a wider foot, then I would say just go with your normal Under Armour sizing or your normal Nike sizing, which would be like half size up from your typical Reebok stuff. I don't know if I've completely confused you, but these run bigger than the Tribase Rain 5s, the Tribase Rain 4s, pretty much all the other Tribase Rains in the past. These are for sure the widest fitting one. There's ample space in the toe box, and it might just feel like these shoes are on the bigger side. They are also on the longer side as well. So, like I said, if you're somebody that liked Under Armours for being not super wide, you're probably gonna need to size these ones down. But if you were somebody that didn't wear Under Armour shoes because they were too narrow, then you're actually gonna really like these shoes because they've got a solid amount of width. I don't think that anybody is going to find these to be narrow at all. All right, so when it comes to running, we have two different scenarios to go over. The majority of people that are buying shoes and doing CrossFit are probably gonna find themselves running outside. And for that purpose, I think that the Tribase Range 6s are okay. They are definitely on the heavier side, but like I said before, the flexibility and the comfort from the midsole actually masks that pretty well. If all you're doing is like basically just shuffling your feet around and not falling over, then I think the Tribase Rains are gonna be fine. They're, like I said, comfortable and they're flexible. So if you're running and you don't really have to be as active with your feet, then I think the Tribase Range 6s are gonna be okay. Now for the other situation, people that are doing the majority of their running on an air runner, a non-motorized treadmill, I thought that these were just not good. I was surprised at how much I hated these shoes for running on the Air Runner. It just felt like you could definitely feel the weight when you're running on the Air Runner, when you have to pull the track, when you actually have to be way more active with your calves, your glutes, your whole entire posterior chain. Using these shoes, it was extra tiring to me. And that might have to do with the more minimal drop and the extra weight. But for whatever reason, I just could not get a good run-in with these on the Air Runner. I know that's a small amount of people. It's growing in the CrossFit world, but it's still a small amount of people. So if you're somebody that runs outside, these are gonna be okay. If you're gonna be running in the treadmill, I'd say just take yourself outside and just go do your runs outside. But what I did find was that weight didn't affect certain movements as much as I thought it would. I was able to do bar-facing burpees in these shoes, no problem. I thought doing shuttle runs in these shoes, like a quick little sprint, was just fine in these shoes. There was a little weird pressure point, like when you stop to make your three-point touch, I felt like this little ridge on the sidewall pushed into my metatarsal. That was a little uncomfortable, but I don't think that that's a deal breaker with these shoes. When it came to doing box jumps, I definitely noticed the weight of these shoes. I didn't like doing box jumps. When you're deep into a workout and you've got to do repeated box jumps or you're moving your feet that much, then I didn't really like these shoes. For something like double unders, I did not have a problem with the weight. I was able to track the rope pretty easily. I didn't get or notice extra fatigue from jumping with the extra weight of these shoes. So it really just kind of depends on what you're doing. Overall, I'd say that the weight is not that big of a hindrance with these. And if you're doing really long runs, you probably have running shoes to wear as well, and you're probably not going to want to wear these. But for in the box training, I thought that these handle body weight movements just fine. So when it came to lifting, I actually really liked the Tribase Range 6s because they don't feel like anything else on the market. In a world where we're getting up to, like 6, 7, 9 millimeter drop shoes, the Tribase Rain 6s only have a 2 millimeter drop. And I can't think of anything else out there that isn't a barefoot shoe that has a flat drop like 2 millimeters. I mean, 4 millimeters was like the kind of go-to flat drop. 2 millimeters, you won't notice the difference between 2 and 4 that much, but these definitely feel a lot flatter than, say, the Nano 14s that I have been testing with a 7 millimeter drop. So if you're looking for something that had a flatter profile, I think that these are going to be great. Some of the things that I really liked about lifting in these was the first one being the grip. So you have this little thing on the side that says engage the big toe, which is it's a little campy, but it's actually something that works with these shoes. The amount of toe grip and ground control that you get with these, being that they are flat, they are relatively low to the ground. There's a wide toe box. There's plenty of room for your feet to splay. It makes them a really stable feeling shoe. Now, these are not barefoot shoes, and the drop-in midsole, it's a little bit on the softer side, but I felt like responsiveness in these was just fine. I was able to hit my Olympic weightlifting movements in these shoes just fine. I was able to deadlift pretty good weight in these shoes just fine. I never batted an eyelash. I never felt like I was pushing into nothing. And the same went with all of my squatting movements. Now, I will say that if you don't have the greatest mobility, something like this is not going to be optimal if you wanted to, front squat, back squat. But if you have got pretty good mobility and you wanted something that was more minimal but wasn't quite a barefoot shoe, I think that the Tribase Rain 6s are really, might be the only option to get. But if you're somebody that wanted a more like dense midsole, then you might want to try these out before you buy them, because the midsole has a little bit of give to it. Like I said before, it never detracted from any of my lifts, but it's gonna be on the softer side. It does not, I wanna say, lose its responsiveness at like any of the weights that I have been using these shoes with, which is up to like 500 pounds for a deadlift. But I think that might bug somebody if you wanted something that was, if you wanted something like that was like rock solid, then you would just get a barefoot shoe. But if you wanted some kind of cushioning and you wanted a flatter profile, you wanted a wide toe box, then I think the Tribase Rain 6s are the shoe that you're gonna wanna look into. All right, so the Tribase Rain 6s retail for $130, which is now on the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to, I guess, like the flagship training shoes. So the person that I would recommend this shoe for is somebody that is looking for a more lower profiled shoe that still had a wide toe box and retained pretty good ground feel without going full barefoot. They finally feel like they have some kind of identity or personality compared to the previous models. The previous models just like, they slapped a few things together and they were good, they worked well, but there was no like specific reason as to why you would want to buy them. Now we actually have, a reason to buy the shoe. It's different than all the other shoes out there. It's flat, it's flexible, it could definitely use a little bit of weight shaving, but it doesn't feel like any other training shoe on the market. And for that reason alone, I like it. There are no glaring faults on this shoe. You can lift in it well, you do your body weight movements in it pretty well. The only thing that I don't really like about it is running, but if I've ran in worse shoes, and if you're somebody that has come from some of the previous CrossFit shoes of old and you're going to run into these, I think you're not gonna have that much of a problem. Now, if they take the shoe and they just refine it just a little bit, even maybe through like little micro adjustments throughout the year, that they're gonna really have a top tier contender on their hands. If you guys have any questions about the Tribase Rain 6s, feel free to leave them in the comments section. And as always, guys, please hit that like button, subscribe, and thanks for watching.